Being here today, whether you're joining us in person or online, we really appreciate that and look forward to you having a great time this morning, something that was really worth the investment of your very valuable time. We don't take that for granted. We appreciate every minute of it, and we hope that you really get something out of it today. I am from the old world of industry and analog technology. What that means is when I was your age, a computer took up a room this big. The one that's in your wristwatch or your cell phone now, it was in a room this big. I am from that world, the one that graduated into hard drives that weigh 45 pounds, monochromatic yellow on green screens, a graphic user interface, or a GUI as we used to call it, zip drives, and then everything went crazy. And so the analog world of my background has been, of course, stomped flat by the digital world of today. And the old world of industry has been largely outsourced to other people who, ironically, are in their present, are living my past as we've taken on the new world of creativity, innovation, and R&D, especially in an area like this in the Bay. So being an immigrant to this world, I feel like I've gone through a kind of an Ellis Island of my own, largely administered by the Apple Corporation, to try to learn the language of this new world and try to be a good guest here, you know, to function here, at least enough to get by among the natives. And so I've been realizing that one of the aspects of the New World that is a little more subtle than some of the other aspects is that the New World highly values being a global citizen, whereas the Old World valued more being a citizen just of where you were born, largely with a consciousness of mostly just that place. It was pretty ethnocentric and national-centric and so forth. So I'm thinking to myself the other day, if I'm going to continue to bluff this new world thing, what do I have to do to be a global citizen? And of course, one thing is you have to know a language other than the language that you were raised with. And so my vernacular language is English, and Jan and I are now watching Telemundo addictively to learn Spanish. We watch novelas every single night. With the screaming and the slapping, it's fantastic television. It's the best television on the planet. I'm not trying to be, you know, make fun of it. We enjoy them. I mean, they're amazing, and it's incredible to learn a language when you can see the context. So we have the English subtitles turned on. Who does this, right? This is insane. And we watch Telemundo with the English or Spanish subtitles on, rather, and we attempt to connect the words to what's going on the screen, and by so doing, we do a kind of conceptual kind of translation in the hopes that we, like a small child born into a Spanish-speaking family, will become fluent in the language without ever cracking a book. Are you feeling me a little bit there? So that's plan one, to be a global citizen. The other plan is that I am committed to understanding soccer. Now, what I've found is that my friends who love the beautiful game love it with great intensity, but it can be hard to explain. For example, none of my soccer friends has ever told me how many people are on a soccer team. So when I ask them, how does the game work, usually they go right to the beauty. It's an aesthetic kind of an experience. It's the postmodern game. It's these kinds of things, all of which I appreciate and I understand a little bit. But there's a kind of a reluctance. It's like a bad church. When someone asks you, well, why are you here? And you kind of go, well, we meet at 11 o'clock on Sunday. and it's hard to sort of explain the whys behind the what. And so I thought to myself the other day, riding the elliptical machine in a futile effort to extend my life, watching the television while my earbuds are plugged in, and I'm thinking to myself, I could watch soccer during these 40 minutes of interval training, and this could begin the path to a cultural conversion that could make me a better immigrant to the new world. And so I turn on the soccer channel, and of course it's one of the preliminary games in the Olympics, and it's two women's teams playing against each other, and one of them is vastly better than the other one, because that happens a lot in the early rounds. And I'm watching it go back and forth, and I am so lost. I feel like someone trying to get from LA to San Francisco with their GPS out, and you get lost in the mazes on 580, 880, 980, 880, 580, and that whole thing. But as I watch, about half an hour in, I suddenly start to recognize the offensive plays from basketball. The give and go, the feed to the low post, the shot from the corner. And I start to recognize the defenses from basketball. One-on-one, zone, two-on-one, the zone press, full court press. And I go to myself, it's like foot basketball. So now I've got what you must have for cross-cultural understanding, a metaphor. And I am working this metaphor to death. So 40 minutes later, when I'm in a sweat, my heart rate is about 190, and I'm thanking God that my workout on the machine is done. If you don't believe there's a God, just get on a machine for long enough and it will bring you to faith. And I jump off this thing and I'm feeling so good because at last now I have a grasp on this beautiful game, which is really a centerpiece of this new world because it's vastly more international than any of the things that we think of as major sports here if you've only ever lived stateside. I thought when I came out of the old world, I was finished, like a loaf of bread coming out of the oven. And I arrived at a state I would just call normal. I had a job, I had a car, I had a wife, I had a house. I didn't have a computer because nobody had one of those. I had no digital hardware whatsoever. And I had achieved this normal state. And then suddenly, all of that is swept aside by this digital tsunami in which we now live, and I find myself in a new normal. Where normal now is more hardware packed into your cell phone than existed on the face of the entire planet just 20 or 30 years ago. No matter where you are in the course of your life, the tendency of all of us is to come to a kind of equilibrium point, a kind of homeostasis. And then things will come along that will bump that normal into a new normal if anything else is going to happen. In other words, for change to occur, normal is not going to get the job done. So this month we're going to concentrate on the idea of transitions. Because most of how our lives turn out is going to come down to how we handle the changes. Because no matter where you are in your life, I can guarantee you that it's not going to be the same a year from now. If you are single, I can't guarantee you the 1 year thing, but there's about a 95% chance that you're going to get married. People come to us sometimes and say, oh, people in states far away years long ago, oh, will I ever find someone? And we're like, geez, don't you have a computer? Don't you know what Google is? Look it up. The chance that you are going to remain single is like the chance that you're going to be killed in an asteroid strike. I mean, it could happen, but it's not going to. And if you're married, you're going to have a child. That's just how it's going to be. And then that child is going to leave you and call you every single week, multiple times a week, not because they love you, but because they want your money. Mom, Dad, send me money. If you're a student, you are going to graduate. Even though that seems wildly unlikely, you are going to graduate. You're going to make it through. And so no matter where your normal is, your homeostatic point, your new place of equilibrium, something is going to bump that aside and you're going to come out to a new normal. What you do with those changes is going to determine the quality of your whole life. The stuff in between, we kind of have a script for that. Even your wedding will have a planner. It's the change points and navigating them that really is the challenge. Now this seems odd to talk about in a church because people see churches as sort of the nagging voice of conservative conscience, the cultural Luddites, the people who are all about holding the fort and pushing back against the tides of this and the evil onslaught of that, and that we're sort of bonded to just holding on this white-knuckled desperation to some long-ago fictional past that never really was, that we've cooked up to justify our own existence. But it's not really the way, Jesus handled it. We're very committed to the authority of the Bible here. That's the center of who we are and the center of what we believe. But when Jesus talked about how that translates into a real life, he didn't talk a lot about holding the fort. In fact, he told his early followers, look, I want you to stay in the city of Jerusalem for a while. And then the power of the Holy Spirit's going to come upon you. And when it comes upon you, you're going to be able to be witnesses, that is, people that proclaim the good news about his death and resurrection, here in the city, in the region around it in Judea, in the sort of next circle of suburbs, if you will, in a place called Samaria, and you're going to go out into the outer parts of the world. It's going to sweep across the entire Roman Empire. Repeat, 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 and you're at 360 Church in Berkeley this morning. So the Spirit's power comes on the church just as the way Jesus promised, the same power that's available to us today. And this faith, which begins in one place, in one city, spills out into the region of Judea, goes beyond that into Samaria, and goes beyond that into the city of Antioch, 300 miles up the coast in the nation of Syria that's so much in the news today. Every single time that the good news about Jesus expanded, there was a geographic miracle, because covering distance in the ancient world is horrifically difficult. But more importantly, there's a cross-cultural miracle. You know, no matter where you live, you tend to think of that place as the Big Apple. You know what I mean? Oh, there's no place like St. Louis. Have you heard that? People, please. You know, if you're from New York, that's like the real Big Apple. People from San Francisco, have you ever heard how they talk about people in the East Bay? It's not nice. I mean, there's some, I've heard this even on the street in San Francisco. You know, guys in San Francisco, everybody's got the black swimsuit on, like they're the front man for an indie rock band, you know? They all look like, and they all look like that guy that is the lead singer for Maroon 5, except they're in the suit. And they talk about us like we're trash. I mean, like we have some genetic flaw here, or something that makes us sort of way less. Contra Costa, do you know what it means? The other coast. Like Chicago is the second city. Everybody's like that. The people in Jerusalem were like that too. Their town was the Big Apple, Jew, Gentile, whatever. This is the place. And to go outside this place was always to be less. And so to be with the hillbillies who lived up north in Galilee, that was a you gotta be kidding me kind of proposition. The whole idea that the Messiah could have lived up there was laughable from their point of view. And to pass through Samaria, ooh, on the way, please, those people are trash. They're mixed race garbage. We don't want anything to do with them. And to go past that and burst through these two barriers in order to get to a place like Antioch, this is phenomenally impossible from the point of view of the people who hear the instruction of Jesus, stay here until the power comes. And yet, they do it. A miracle of cross-cultural evangelism takes them to the city of Antioch, and they arrive there, but every miracle has limits. Jesus called Lazarus out of the tomb, brought him back to life out of death. That's a miracle, but it didn't stop him from dying again. Miracles have limits. And so this miracle raced to Antioch, 300 miles away, and parked there. And people gathered, and as they did, things began to really go well. And the way it raced there was people from Cyprus and from what is today Tunisia arrived in Antioch, brought the good news about Jesus to both Jews and Gentiles. Maybe it's interesting that Tunisia is the place where Arab Spring starts as well, another revolution. That good news comes to Antioch. The church just blossoms into life, not just among Jews, but also among Gentiles. And the move of God there is so powerful that the people in Jerusalem, who are the sort of foundation church folks in the equation, hear about it. And you know, people who are in that position don't always take kindly to somebody else coming from the outside and doing what they're supposed to do, you know. We're the headwaters around here. We're in charge of this deal. It started here in our upper room, not in your upper room. And now people from Africa and Cyprus are coming and they're doing our deal, man. We've got to find out if this is for real. And so they picked the nicest guy they knew, a man named Barnabas, and they sent him up the road to Antioch, a long, dangerous journey to find out what was going on. And he found out it was really good. that God had opened a door of grace to the Gentiles as well as the Jews. The witness of Christ was alive. People were being changed. They were taking care of each other. They were loving each other. It was a tremendous kind of a situation, and he sent back a really great report. In this church, there was a prophet who made an announcement that a famine was on the way in the region, and so the church took an offering, and Paul and Barnabas took that offering back down the road to Jerusalem and delivered it to the people there so that they wouldn't starve during the famine. Paul spends about a year with Barnabas in Antioch teaching the new converts. This sounds so wonderful. But it very quickly becomes normal. Well, where does the new normal come from? On the back of your program today, there's a brief passage from Acts chapter 13. We're going to read that together. And it talks about how the new normal came to this place in Antioch. Now, there were in the church in Antioch prophets and teachers: Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Menachem, a lifelong friend of Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. While they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." And then, after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them and sent them off. When I read this passage, I immediately thought of the Big Bang Theory, where you get everything pulled together in this hot, dense state at the beginning, and all kinds of pressure is applied to it, and then BAM! And it's a process of continuous expansion. That's almost what happens here. You get all these diverse people together, God begins to move, and it's like fuel, oxygen, and ignition source. And off it goes. So what happens here is you have a very strategic location. Antioch is at the crossroads of two major trade routes. It's the capital of this Roman province. About 500,000 people live there, about the population of Oakland. There is a group of about 70,000 Jews who live in the city. And Antioch is really famous. It's a cultural crossroads. Everybody who's operative in the ancient world is pouring their culture into the place. And the other thing it's famous for is comedy. They didn't exactly have comedy clubs then, but the people in Antioch were famous for their sense of humor, and archaeologists have actually recovered examples of it in the form of things that are printed on coins and inscriptions. So the culture there, as you could call it, lively. And every time I think about Antioch, I can't stop thinking about here. What it's like for us to live in the city of Berkeley, and the liveliness and the multicultural mix of people that's here, in this kind of perfect storm of influences that are coming together. If you look at the list of names that are here, they tell really the whole story. Barnabas is from Cyprus. He's not from Jerusalem. Simeon is a man of color. Lucius of Cyrene. Cyrene is a city on the coast of what would have been Tunisia. He's an African. Menachem, a lifelong friend of Herod the Tetrarch. He's a one-percenter. And Saul is Paul, the man who would write such a huge portion of the New Testament. These are people from everywhere and anywhere, put together in a mix of diversity that is unbelievable. This is a strategic place, and these are strategic people. They have teachers who are supplying spiritual depth, and prophets who are supplying spiritual inspiration in equal proportion. And in that atmosphere, with everything growing and working, the Spirit of God shows up and says, "Party's over." Your two favorite people, we're blasting them out of here. Dang. I wonder what their story wall looked like. You know, here's the guy who came from Cyprus, Bob. Here's the guy who came from Cyrene, Ned. Here's the first meeting at somebody's dining room table. Here's the first big group meeting at the Hotel Antioch. Here's another picture of Barnabas coming up sent by the suspicious brothers down in Jerusalem. And here's Saul coming in, and here's the meetings we used to have together. Here's a picture of the pizzas we used to order from Little Caesars. Here's how we took care of each other. Here's the T-shirt from our first church picnic. Assembly of God of Antioch, Syria, year 56. And then all of a sudden the Spirit of God intervenes in this situation and says, basically, God's heard your prayers. And the only way we're going to get from this normal to where the good news about Jesus needs to go is a new normal has to be created. And that new normal is you're sending church now. We feel that this is exactly what is happening to us. That we are being transitioned from being a church plant to a planting church. In fact, in our leadership self-talk, we're always reminding ourselves not to use church plant wording anymore. Because church plant wording is the equivalent of struggling, little, and let's not go there because they might not make it. So it's not good. It's not good. But planting church, that's a missionary statement. That's a statement full of purpose. And that's a statement that says that the only way that more people are going to hear this good news is for someone to go and tell them. Well, we have a couple of people who are going to do that from 360 Church. That's Jeff and Erica Sandstrom. And their last Sunday with us will be August the 12th as they get ready to go and start their new congregation in Plainfield, Illinois. Now on that day, we're going to do great stuff. We're going to take a big offering for them, so save up all your money and bring it on August the 12th. We're going to have a big luncheon over at Nathan and Angela George's home and a send-off and all kinds of things. But that's a couple Sundays out. And this month, we're really going to focus on this idea of these transitions and becoming a place that sends. And what that means is to be part of us, you're kind of putting your life in jeopardy. Because the Spirit of God moving here in Acts 13 is a disruptive force. So I told our team this morning, I've shot my career in the head a couple times already, so I'm fine with that. That's my new normal. If I'm learning soccer, you can be a missionary. Now that doesn't mean you change your address or your job or your aspirations. It just may mean you go at them from a little different angle than you did before with a new kind of power. But I believe that this room and the next place that we'll meet and the place after that are going to be places of disruption, where God just sweeps in and he changes me, changes all of us, and he sends us to people, even if it's people we already know. We'll go to them with a new heart and a new mind. And that's going to make this the most fun you've ever had in your whole life. Well, I'm going to ask Jeff to join me for a few minutes, and we want to just chat for a little bit about what all this actually looks like when it happens to somebody. It's good in theory, isn't it?
It's always good in theory. Yeah, it's always good in theory.
I like your necktie. That's great.
It's $3. Thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. So here you were, graduating from college, minding your own business. You're the head of the student government at college. I know how many people knew you on the campus. You had people, doors open in front of you for safer, saner things. Tell us a little bit about how you guys ended up in Berkeley.
I blame that on you, really. We had to have a leadership retreat at college, and a friend of mine suggested we invite Earl Krebs to speak. I'd never heard of the guy before, but where we came from, he is an absolute celebrity. Everyone knows him and everyone loves him. That's just the way it is. And so he agreed to come and speak, and at the end he said, if you want to do something safe, you can do that, but if you want to do something dangerous, come with us and help us plant a church in Berkeley. And I said okay and shot my career in the face. And that was kind of how I ended up in the decision to come out here.
You had other alternatives, Jeff, that you could have done. Why a startup? What were you thinking at the beginning that might come to mean in your life or your ministry, since you could have gone a bunch of other ways?
Yeah, I don't know. Looking back on it in retrospect, it doesn't look like I weighed my options. There was a job at a church with people and a paycheck, or there was something that didn't exist yet. and it could be whatever we want it to be. And somehow that just looks so much more appetizing. And I'm so glad that I made the right choice. This experience here will shape me for the rest of my life. And I mean, God definitely had something to do with it. I felt that God was speaking to my heart about, this is what you've been preparing for. This is, and people say, oh, Berkeley, you'd fit in great, and you and Earl get along awesome and everything. And Earl and I getting along was true. The fitting in, it kind of took me a while to fit the culture here because there is no other place on earth like Berkeley. But I felt like God spoke to my heart and said that this is it. Just, you don't know how it's going to happen, but step out and I'll take care of you.
Whenever I talk trash about the Holy Spirit being disruptive and coming in and changing your plans in Berkeley, I notice the anxiety level elevates in the room almost immediately. Should they be afraid?
Yes, be very afraid. In all seriousness, if you're not afraid, there's probably something wrong with you. Because when the Holy Spirit, I believe, when the Holy Spirit talks and speaks and works in your heart, he hardly ever asks you to do things that you can do. That's the point of his existence, is to help you and come beside you in things that you can't do. You can't do on your own. And I think that's where God gets the most glory, when we're called to do something that that's not easy and that you can't do. Because if you could, then people would be clapping at you and not God.
So when it came down to it, how did you know that you were supposed to do this?
Sometimes there's a still small voice, really, really quiet inside your heart. And if you're a good person, you'll listen to it. And if you're a bad person, you'll try not to listen to it. I'm a bad person. I tried not to listen to it, but I couldn't get away from it. And so before you and Jan actually let me stay at your house while I was on spring break, my senior year of college, and before I even came out here, I felt like God was speaking to me. I was trying to get an answer saying, what am I supposed to do with my life? And God said, trust me. Trust me and I'll take care of you. I don't like that because I like security. I like to know that things are going to be taken care of. I like to be in charge, is what I'm saying. And when you give your life up to God, you're kind of giving that right up. You're giving up the right to be in charge. And so that's what I felt. I felt that this is the right decision, and I don't get to see how everything gets played out. I just say yes and trust that things will be okay. And they were. And so my faith grew just that much. Like the Grinch's heart grew just a little bit. That's how faith was for me.
So Berkeley becomes the kind of normal, if we can use that word, about our city here. How did heading out to Plainfield start to happen for you and Erica? What did you feel or sense, or how did the direction to do that start to go?
Well, first of all, my wife has always loved Chicagoland. That's something that's deep within her heart, and I couldn't pry that out with a crowbar if I tried. For me, it's a little different. Started getting in contact with people that I knew from high school, whether it was texting or calling or Facebook. One person actually was on their way to a marathon to run in Hawaii and had a layover in SFO and asked if we'd like to meet up with her. I said sure, and so we did. But as I started talking to these people that I knew, my heart started to grow a little bit. And be concerned for their spiritual lives, and I don't know how to say it. I started to have a heart for the people that I should have told about Christ in high school, and I never did. And so these thoughts started to enter my mind of, well, what are we going to do about that? And so I guess that was the first flame. That's what sparked this whole idea of what is this all about? I started having dreams about these people. I started having even nightmares about these people that I knew, burning in hell, saying, how come you never told me? And that's something that you just can't ignore. And if you do, you're a bad person.
When you guys close your eyes and think about your new ministry in Plainfield, I know it's very early and you haven't made a lot of strategic decisions and all of that, but just what's your general feeling of the dream there for the church? What's it kind of going to be about?
Well, basically, we have learned so much here at 360. Things obviously will be different. There's different culture and things like that, but we want to take everything we've learned here and uproot and take it with us and introduce people to Jesus Christ in the Chicagoland area, specifically Plainfield. And people may have ideas of who God is or what God's about, but there is so much ambiguity there, and they don't have this a relationship with Jesus. And largely in suburbs, what the disconnect between people having a relationship with God and not is after they graduate from the youth group, if you know what I mean, and they kind of drop off, and I don't know where they go, but they go somewhere, and then sometimes they show back up when they're married and they have their first kid because they want their kids to grow up in church. But we really want to focus on this, I don't even know what you would call it, this youth group drop-off, I guess. I don't know. People, when they leave and they say, okay, well, the church is very family-orientated, and I don't have a family, so what do I do? Those are the people that we have a heart for. Those are the people I see in my dreams, and those are the people who get us up in the morning.
So for people here who might want to have this kind of openness for God to be disruptive in some way, what would your advice be for them? How do you stay open to something like that involves these kind of feelings and challenges? Any suggestions for us?
That is a really good question. I'm the last person. I didn't even tell my wife about those dreams I was having because I was too afraid of what the answer might be to what we should do about it. The way to stay open is, I guess, whatever this means to you, is to not close yourself off to the Spirit. And when you feel like He may be speaking something, you feel like, if you've ever gone to a youth group and sometimes you feel or you hear this voice that says like Guatemala or something, you're like, oh, what does this mean? Is God calling me to be a missionary? No, I'll never go there. When you say you'll never do that, you might just end up doing that. I said that about this. I said we'll never go home. We'll never go home. Not unless we're like 50 or something. And that's exactly what God has called us to do. So I would say a way to be open would to be, that subconscious you always have in your mind. You're like, oh, what am I going to wear today? What is it? This and that, all that stuff that's constantly running through your mind. Use that and adapt that to filtering talking to God. I mean, you don't have to ask God what you should wear today, but the kind of thoughts that constantly run through your mind, let that be your concentration constantly on the Spirit. And that's, I think, how the Spirit speaks to a lot of us, is through the random thoughts that come through our mind. That's how it happened to us.
Guys, give Jeff and Erica a big ovation, please. Thanks. William Larkin, who's a New Testament scholar, wrote this about this passage. He said, a church that embodies cultural diversity and has spiritually gifted, sensitive, and obedient leaders will release into Christ's service those so called, earnestly interceding for them and standing in solidarity with them. With more than half the world's population yet to hear the gospel for the first time, our Lord needs many more Antiochs. Our heart, our prayer is for this place to be that it will be a place not only of great community and connection, but a place of disruptions big and small. Even if we do the same things, that we would do them in a different way. And lots of us are going to end up doing different things than we ever dreamed, and having more fun than you ever thought was possible in one lifetime, because God is doing something strong and powerful through you. We're so proud of Jeff and Erica and what they're doing. This is just so wonderful. We've only been open here for 11 months. And so our first couple is already going out
The only question now is where will the next plant be? And who will be involved in it? Or the next nonprofit, or the next startup, or whatever it turns out to be. We see ourselves not as a warehouse, but as an incubator, as a launching pad, not as a dome over people's expectations. And our prayer is that God will give us all grace to be open to these disruptions, and we'll be able to maintain the kind of atmosphere where they're more likely rather than less likely. I'm going to ask our band to join us if they would, and if you guys would join